Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reigniting Small Business, the podcast. I'm Laura Richards here with Patrick Lee, CEO of Spark Business Institute. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Laura.
So, Patrick, we have been talking and hearing a lot about the new phenomenon dubbed the Great Resignation. So we have a record of 4 million people who quit their jobs just in April. And we're going to use our time today to look at the reasons why and the safeguards that we as small business owners should be taking to retain our employees.
Yeah, this whole Great Resignation comes on the heels of people having a lot of time and space to think during the pandemic, right? Our society is known as being totally production oriented and obsessed, right? We work more hours than any other, Western country, that whole thing. Like we produce, and without commutes, meetings, and obligations, out of the office, we had a lot of time and space to consider how we actually feel about life and work. We're not just on that hamster wheel. And what is the balance that we want to maintain moving forward? So all of a sudden, folks were forced to have an introspective look at what was valuable to them and what mattered and stuff. And I think we're seeing the results of some of that. In an NPR article called "As the Pandemic Recedes, Millions of Workers Are Saying I Quit," Andrea Sue interviewed Jonathan Caballero, who epitomizes what we're talking about right here. Okay. So the article says Caballero made a startling discovery last year. At 27, his hair was thinning. Now, that's an important thing to note. Okay? The software developer realized that life was passing by too quickly for him as he was hunkered down at home in Hyattsville, Maryland, right? There was so much to do, so many places to see. Caballero envisioned a life in which he might end the workday with a swim instead of a long commute in traffic to get home. So when his employer began calling people back to the office part-time, he balked at that 45-minute commute. He started looking for a job with better remote work options and quickly landed multiple offers. So, quote from him, "I think the pandemic has changed my mindset in a way, like I really value my time now," right? So we see where this is going.
Patrick, this really epitomizes what we're seeing in people rethinking what it looks like for them to work. And think about it. A lot of people lost someone during the pandemic. So the value of life, the value of that next day, there's a new emphasis placed on that, in addition to having this ability to remote work and say, wow, I can be home at 5 o'clock to have dinner with my kids. I never was able to do this before. Yeah. So, on top of all of that, employees want to feel like they're valued. We see a big part of the exodus from the labor market coming from service industries and the entertainment industry and retail. So more than 740,000 people who quit in April worked in the leisure hospitality industry, which includes hotels, bars, and restaurants, theme parks, and entertainment venues, with the next largest category being retail. And think about it. These are positions with, historically low pay, poor benefits. In some cases, they're dealing with angry customers who they're trying to get to wear their masks. So now they're enforcing, these kinds of policies that they've never been in a place to do that. And they're taking health risks with their own health. So, you can see how they're adding it up, and it's just not worth it for them anymore.
Yeah, and typically when we see people quitting jobs in large numbers and looking to move to other things, we're in a very healthy economy, right? There's plenty of jobs. They have a little bit of choice. They're looking around. But this is very, very different because the pandemic led to the worst U.S. recession in history. Millions of people out of work. And yet employers are now experiencing and complaining about labor shortages. So it's becoming clear that remote work has had a profound impact on how people think about when and where they want to work and what's valuable to them in regards to work versus that balance, that, home life balance. So I think it's kind of naive for business owners to think that after these employees have been given unprecedented flexibility and time, and that they've had a chance to figure out what they really want, that we're just going to go back to what existed before. That's not going to work.
Absolutely. And in many sectors where the employees felt undervalued, not listened to, unheard, and even unsafe, as we were saying, a lot of these employees fall into that small business category, I got to say. So think about it. We were doing everything to maintain our cash flow, to redesign our business processes so we comply with all the changing requirements and such around the pandemic. And then, we've got to maintain, lean margins. So we're maybe furloughing folks and creating a lean staffing situation. So all of that required tons of communication, and it wasn't always done perfectly because as small business owners, we're overtaxed, we're stressed, we're doing many things. So if communication did take a backseat in your organization, now's the time, right, to address that. And with everything changing and uncertain, we don't want to leave our employees adrift.
So this has manifested itself in some very clear examples. I was at a networking event recently, live networking event, by the way, where I ran into one of Maryland County's workforce development directors. Actually, I think it was the associate director. And we started chatting about this whole subject. And he told me a fascinating story about this, because he basically said that, he's got a lot of business owners coming to him, more so than normal, because it's hard to find people. So they're actually saying, okay, let's go talk to workforce development. So he had an owner of a restaurant approach him and say, look, I've opened back up. I cannot hire any bus people at all to bus the tables and stuff. I can't hire a dishwasher. I can't get in these basic menial jobs, that used to be filled by kids and stuff. They're not taking this anymore. And I'm not able to find sort of a low wage person. What do I do? So this guy said to him, he said, well, I tell you right now, those prices, those rates you're offering per hour aren't going to get you what you want. You've got to bump it up. And the guy goes, well, what do I got to pay? And so the economic development guy says, you got to pay $20 an hour. And the owner's like, no way, I'm not paying $20 an hour for a dishwasher. So long story short, he contracted with the workforce development to find him people. They went out with the prices he was willing to pay. They got nothing. They raised it. Finally, he gets a dishwasher at $20 an hour. It's the only one that he gets that's willing to take the job. So this dishwasher is working at $20 an hour and is working tons of overtime because there is no other dishwasher. So now the business owner is saying to the workforce development fella, hey, this is great. You got me this, but this person between all of these factors is now making more than my chef. If my chef were ever to find this out, my entire organization is going to implode, because then everybody's got to be raised, right? So we got that whole inflationary piece there, but we also got look, folks now are saying we're controlling our production. You're not going to rent it from us at rates we're not willing to accept.
Absolutely. And, obviously it does. It's going to trickle out from there. And that's incredible. So here we are. We've highlighted what's gotten us here. What do you think is going to happen to people who are joining this great resignation? If we have everyone leaving their job, do you think there's a danger?
We have to be careful here. For those thinking about changing jobs or just quitting, I would caution you, like I would do my own children. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you should too. I think there's some factors here that are going to begin to play out a little bit, and they're longer term though, right? Right now in the short term, I'm not sure where this goes, but longer term, here's what we have. We have folks who are looking for highly skilled positions who are getting no applicants, right? Nobody's moving out of those jobs necessarily. And so there's a lot of demand where there's no supply. Then down at the bottom, at these lower positions we talked about, lower paying positions, we've got a lot of demand. But we have a workforce who no longer sees value in those lower positions, but doesn't necessarily have the skills for these positions up here. That's going to have to balance somehow. And so does that mean that people are going to start going back to school for retraining or pick up skills, or exactly how is this over time going to level out? I don't know. But in specifics now, quitting your job during the Great Resignation, right? I think you got to think about this. So in a Forbes article entitled, "Don't Quit Your Job Because Everyone Else is Following the Great Resignation Trend," Jack Kelly points out that before one decides to quit, they should make a checklist of all the reasons as to why you want to leave, analyze each of the points, and ensure that you are looking at this decision in a clear and thoughtful manner, right? If the signs indicate, then have a conversation with your manager. Explain how you are feeling and what you are looking for with a positive approach. It could turn out that your current situation can be remedied or altered or adapted to better suit what you're now looking for. And if not, at least you'll know, and perhaps you can make an arrangement to keep doing your work during your transition or job search, right? Because we already know they're going to have a hard time finding a replacement, right? And also keep in mind, when you quit a job without a new job in hand, you place yourself in a precarious position. You might feel good for a few days. However, after that, you have to start a new job search, right? Job creation of some sort. So, hire employers may wonder, if you'll leave them too. And you've also got to maintain your self-confidence while unemployed, while job searching, and that can be difficult, right? You got salary negotiations coming up. There's no guarantee that leaving this one means you're going to be in a better one, right? And a lot of times, you don't have as much leverage if you're not in a current job. That being said, if you have the skills, this may be the time to jump. So this is one of those things where you really just got to be very cognizant of the repercussions of the decisions you make.
100%. And that's a good point. So in a Microsoft survey of more than 30,000 global workers, 41% of workers were considering quitting or changing professions this year. So that's a lot of change. So for our business owners who are listening right now, we should talk about what we can do to keep our employees. How do we go about retaining them? There's a Fast Company article called "A Key Mistake Leaders Are Making is Causing the Great Resignation." And that was authored by Eric Mosley. And he recommended 3 ways to fix it. So if we can all think back to that pre-pandemic economy, a lot of workplaces had, basketball courts and, coffee stations, kitchens that were stocked, lots and lots of lunches brought in. And the idea behind it was kind of like, we want to keep our employees at work. That was the goal. But Mosley says we should be focusing on the employees' productivity and not how many hours they're in their chair, how much face time they put in. So small business owners really need to become good managers who want their employees to get their job done, and meet deadlines, but only in the way that works best for them. So they're focusing on productivity and completion of tasks rather than face time. So in addition to that, managers have to provide recognition for when things get done and when a job is well done, whether it took 10 minutes or 10 hours. So for small businesses, we already are adaptable. We should have an advantage here, right? We know our staffs typically. So letting that face time take a backseat to productivity when it can, and they're not in conflict with each other, is something that we should be able to do.
Yeah, and that makes sense now that we have sort of myth busted the notion that people can't be as productive when working from home. And, this whole either remote work or adaptable, flexible work considerations are topping the list of what employees want. We did see that folks were very capable of being productive. And we've seen studies that have shown that throughout. But I think a lot of folks say, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me. Well, with the pandemic, it applied to everyone. Like they either were or were not productive. And for the most part, we see that folks were productive. So that same article you're talking about, Mosley points out that employers can offer flexible scheduling options, even, when remote work is not necessarily an option. So for instance, I don't want to spend 3 hours of my day stuck in traffic. Well, can people come in hours earlier and leave hours earlier, or come in later and leave later, or work flex shifts, or, is that a possibility, right? even if you need your team in the office, you can, as an example, you can offer like a employee who's a parent who has a sick child, they can have the opportunity to work, alternate days or different hours to make up their time, right? Catering to that need, but still getting, as you said, that productivity gets done, right? Now, of course, there's some dangers here too, right? You've got to make policy for all employees that is similar and fair, right? So that everybody has similar access. So even those employees that don't have children, how do they get that flexibility?
What's interesting is when I was doing the research for this podcast, I did stumble on an article and it was talking about accountability and how you would think that remote work would lead to less accountability because it's less face time with a manager. And what they've actually found is people have stepped up and taken more ownership over their projects than previously because they own it and it's wholly on them. So this next point by Mosley, I think is so important. And I can tell you, I would have gotten an F when I ran my restaurants. Your employees will emulate you. So be a good role model for a healthy work-life balance. And this is so important because, as small business owners, sometimes we work around the clock. So I just would think if I texted somebody late at night or when I was on vacation or whatever, they're not going to look at it till they're awake or till they work on Monday or whatever the scenario is. It's not true. If people see you as an owner setting an example of texting on the weekend, texting late at night, working while you're on vacation, they're going to get the message they should be doing that. That's what's expected. So leading by example is something I think we all need to check in with ourselves and say, are we doing this and respecting time of our employees who are not at work? Are we creating a culture that's a stressed out culture, or are we giving people the opportunity to communicate when they have enough on their plate?
Yeah. And you have to be, sure to acknowledge differences, right? We're talking in generalities here, but every person's needs are different. And actually, that's an incredibly important thing. Everybody's motivations are different, right? So paths to a healthy, work-life balance will be different for I want to say for everybody, but there's going to be major differences. And, some employees, may appreciate coming in later in the morning, but they won't mind working later. Another employee may be happy to work more hours as long as they're not bothered on the weekend. Some folks want to work shorter days and will work a weekend. I mean, these things, you got to discover them. Trying to just set a policy now is going to tune out a host of folks who don't find that policy working for them.
Yeah. So it's interesting because so much of this seems like common sense, like respecting the individual and communicating and discussing what strategies work best for different people. But I can tell you my experience both in corporate America and then also in small businesses, including my own, this kind of employee-centric perspective and approach didn't really exist and certainly wasn't the norm.
Yeah. And so I think we have to sort of stop here and say, okay, so what are some answers? Like, okay, what do we do? And I actually think this, you're going to talk to both sides here, right? We're going to talk to the business owner. We're going to say to the business owner, hey, look, previously it was a policy-centric workplace. You set the policy, people who want to work there, they work there. Here you go. That's shifted. You can't fill these positions. Folks are willing to quit at the drop of a dime. You're going to have to change that. And one of the things I think you have to do is it's time to find out what actually motivates your employees. And this has been shown forever when you do polls that owners of businesses, managers always think that it's pay, benefits, that those are the things that motivate people. They always say that. But when you go ask employees, the stuff that's up at the top is not those. Now, those things aren't at the bottom. They're solidly at the 4 or the 5. But, reward, acknowledgement, chance to advance, satisfaction, those things rank higher. So even before all of this, that stuff was there. Now I'm going to encourage you business owners, go ask these folks what motivates you. What motivates you? What makes you sing, right? Don't just say, hey, we'll get even another 25 cents an hour. I mean, that may not be building the culture or the longevity of these employees that you want, right? But let's turn that around now and go the other direction. Employees, okay, yeah, we got a great resignation. You're feeling, okay, I'm just going to walk off, here we go. But recognize that this culture is pervasive in all business. So you leave that place because it wasn't right. I'm going to go work for that place. You might get it right, but the culture is still there within our economic setup here of the owner sets policy and you take the job or you don't. It's time to communicate. It's time to go say, hey, look, this is what I realize. If I could have this, this, and this, I'm in, right? And what are you willing to compromise on? What aren't you willing to compromise on? And going back to that, like, is it a good thing to jump on the great resignation train right now? You got to be honest with yourself. Are these things that you're going to find out there, or are they not? And how's that going to work? So, it sounds so silly, but this is a dual communication effort here. Let's all lay out what this looks like and then see, is there a fit or not?
I just think this is such an interesting topic. It was one that we should really update, actually, as these things play out, because I think it has a catchy name, so it's certainly very topical in the news, the Great Resignation. And some articles actually even point to the fact that this has been picked up in the media and just overplayed, that maybe it's not such a big phenomenon as we think. But the numbers support that it is, and there's definitely something going on. And we'll continue to follow it and report back to our listeners.
Yep.
So everybody, thank you for tuning in to another edition of Reigniting Small Business, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.